guys' house right now because he's just coming from Logan Airport. And so we're
Oh,
just right
really?
on top of the border from you guys, I think. I
Oh, I
mean,
didn't
we're
know you lived so close.
right in Keene.
Oh, that you know what? I feel like you've told me that before, and I
I've
just
been a
forgot.
lurker.
All right, it should be streaming, but it's not. Shoot! Why is it doing this to me? Just a moment. I knew this first time was going to be like some sort of crazy situation here. If you're if you're if you're joining on my profile or on YouTube, we're just getting some things squared away, and then we'll be ready to go everywhere. But this is Ashley, and we're going to be talking about author finances, which I think is going to be a lot more exciting than people actually think it is going to be. So,
Oh, I'm a riveting person, so yes.
I've enjoyed chatting just as we get started, so I'm not surprised.
Yeah, when I started in public accounting, my boss was like as old school as they came. And on Saturdays when we'd be going in the office during tax season, he's like, you can totally wear jeans on Saturdays. And I'd come in and he's still in like his suit. I'm like,
Oh, really?
I cannot wear jeans on Saturdays. But he was just
Apparently, yeah.
very much the old guard of accountants. So
That's funny that he's like, you could totally do this, but I am going to not and judge you while it's happening.
His son worked for him too, and he came in. He's like, I worked with my dad for like 20 years. I've never seen him wear jeans. I was like, okay.
Like, good to know, eh? All right, we are live in the Facebook group now too. So hooray! This is like my new life, going live everywhere and then live in the Facebook group. I'll have to deal with it. Also, I don't think group comments will show up in StreamYard here, so I'll just read them out to you as they come in, and then hopefully you can parse it all and get going. Oh, and on top of that, I have to make the post in the group. There's so many manual steps now. I swear, they're just like Facebook's determined to make this as difficult as possible.
Please find another social media platform. They're making it as like they don't want people to do this.
It kind of almost is like that. Yeah, it's like also the other thing they got rid of is all the tools that you might use to schedule posts in a group. Those don't work anymore either. So like you can't schedule anything in a group, and you can't go. The easy way of going live in a group is gone, and it's just kind of like, well, why would we use you anymore then? There's already a lot of reasons not to like put your eggs in someone else's basket like that, and they're just adding to it.
Yeah. See you later, TikTok. That's next.
Oh, I know, right? That's kind of wild. I really wonder what's going to happen. Although there'll be legal challenges next.
Oh yeah,
of course, with that, because the question is actually banning a social media platform affecting people's First Amendment rights? Because you're basically telling people they can't assemble and have free speech, which is also a tricky thing. But that's like a whole other topic that we could go on forever about. So we are finally live in all the places, despite Facebook making this more difficult than it used to be. And I have with me today, Ashley LaFay. LaFay. Oh my God.
You're fine.
I totally think I got it right. LaFay, Ashley LaFay. You know she did not put her last name on here.
I didn't.
So you guys can't see how hard it is to look at and then know how to pronounce. So, but it has like 19 consonants in a row.
It's got some extra letters in there.
It's French. They don't pronounce any of them anyway, so it's fine. But Ashley has, as you can see underneath her name, a business, I guess, called Novel Numbers Accounting for Authors, and you have a number of courses and different tools. So I'll just tell folks a little bit about yourself and what you do.
So I am a CPA up in New Hampshire, and I've been doing public accounting for like 10 years or so. And I have bachelor's, master's, all that stuff. The CPA exam, in case you don't know, is roughly 4 hours each exams. They have a pass rate of like 40%, and we have to do continuing ed every year. So there's really stringent requirements to be a CPA. So when you're looking at hiring an accountant, you will need to make sure whether you want to be a CPA or whether you just want someone who can do tax.
Right.
They do similar things. But
just to interject, there's also like that highlights the difference between someone who's just a bookkeeper and a CPA as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. And bookkeepers, depending on who you work with can be like worth their weight. They can be par neck and neck with a CPA in terms of like actual application of how they want to put things. And honestly, they probably know better about the softwares than a lot of CPAs. But they just don't necessarily are required to have that education piece or that exam piece.
And they might not know some of the legal specifics and whatnot that you get through the education. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, no, sorry. I can ramble, so please interrupt me if I get crazy.
No problem.
So yeah, I'm just a CPA up in New Hampshire. I actually ended up giving up my green visor last year to be able to spend more time with my kiddos. And we had like a real life IVF mix up in our lives when we did our infertility treatments. And it was really traumatic. But I kind of got the bug to write about it. And so I wrote about the IVF clinic messing up and things like that. And then I started researching other ways to write. And I thought, oh, if I'm going to be kind of spending more time with my boys, I'll write more. And so I write picture books and romance books, not on the same name. And I've been following you guys forever. In my first book I wrote ever, on my acknowledgements, I have you and Jill, because I'd been like lurking and following and reading your guys' books for so long. And so Lisa Vino reached out to me in like December. It was just a couple months ago, saying, hey, well, there's nothing for accounting for authors. Do you want to do something? And I gave a presentation in our group, and I thought, well, I can't give a presentation if I don't have anything for someplace for someone to go. And so I spent my tax season not doing taxes, but instead actually like writing a tax book for authors. And
you gotta hold it up. You gotta hold up the front more.
Oh, yeah, sorry. And so I have like all of like the tax stuff and business stuff that like as a quick reference guide.
You still went really fast. What's the title of the book?
Oh, sorry. Author's Business and Financial Handbook.
Author's Business and Financial Handbook. Yeah, just pretend we're all reading really slow, you know, because we are.
ADHD
That's awesome.
is its finest.
Oh, I know, right? Like I flashed it across the screen. I do the same thing, and I like when I go to edit videos I've made. I'm like, oh, Mal. Now you have to put a subtitle in there because you only showed it for 3 seconds, you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that was really hard when I did like the courses and like talking about the different tax structures and things. I was going so fast, and I use my hands a lot. And it's really hard. You're very critical of yourself when you're doing these things.
Oh, yeah. Editing video of yourself is absolutely no fun at all.
So painful.
It's pretty awful.
Yeah, so there's nothing for accounting for authors. So I just figured, why not?
I'm going to come back to that. I just want to say hi to some of the folks that have joined, Peter and Judith and Maria and Jill. And I'm sure there's more folks out there on the different platforms. So say hi if you've come along. And of course, if you're watching a replay, say hi anyway if you want. And if you have any questions about accounting in general for authors, about bookkeeping, about anything to do with finances and being an author, throw them in chat, and we're going to be going through a bunch of different questions for Ashley. But when we get to them, as we get through them, we can pick up yours as well. And Judith says, "I wish there was a UK equivalent book," and I imagine that probably would be really nice.
So if you're a member of Per Writing Aid, me and a UK tax specialist are actually giving an accounting seminar for like the UK versus the US version on, I think it's Friday on the next writing week that they have, you know, the Pro Writing Aid weeks that they have. It's not this week's fantasy week, but it's the one in June, possibly. On that Friday, we're actually doing a breakdown of US versus UK taxes.
That's awesome. And you said that there's nothing else like this for authors. I thought there were courses like this for authors.
There are a little bit, but it's kind of like no one wants to touch on it too much because it's so state specific and it's very country specific. So like, I think Mark LaFay actually has one with another accountant that has done like an accounting for accounting for authors books, though I think it's more bookkeeping related. And then I know there's another girl that I know who is a CPA as well, and she's looking at doing like a tax handbook for authors too, because I feel like there's really not much.
And you're right. Like whenever I hear advice about it, it's very high level. And at a certain point, it always devolves to talk to a tax professional in your local jurisdiction to find out more. So,
yeah, sorry about that.
But at a certain point, it kind of has to, because you can't know everything about where everybody lives and whatnot. And of course, you live in the easy place, New Hampshire. You've got no state income tax. You have no state sales tax. You don't have to worry about any of that stuff. But so I guess you told us a bit about yourself and what you do and how you got into this. What tip would you give to authors, either just starting out to organize their? Actually, we can do as two questions. One for people who are just starting out, and two for people who've been doing this for a while and have done basically nothing to organize their finances and everything. I guess it might be the same advice depending
Yeah, I
on.
think it would. Yeah.
Okay.
It would, I think, separating the personal and the business finances. Like
Okay.
number one, that would be my first thing to tell anyone in the entire world when they want to be an author. It would be very much, it's so easy to find a no fee checking account somewhere and then just set it up. It doesn't matter whether you're a sole proprietorship or a single member LLC, multi-member LLC, partnership, S Corp, C Corp, any of those entities. If you're not going through and actually setting something up formally, you're just a sole proprietorship in the US, and separating those business expenses and that business income from your personal income is just, I can't even begin. I mean, you make better business decisions because you can see what pen names are profitable, what brands are profitable. You can do better tax planning and figure out what you need to send in for estimates. It's easier at tax time because it's so much quicker because you don't have to wade through what was business and what was personal. You have less headaches. Legal compliance, because certain entities actually need to have their own checking account. And then also, a lot of people like to talk about this, but hobby rules in the IRS. If you have losses for too many years, the IRS could potentially challenge you and say like, hey, is this actually a business? If you have a separate bank account, that's actually one of the things they look at to determine whether or not you're a legitimate business. Can I go on a rant for a second?
Sure, rant away.
Okay. All right. So there's a rumor that circulates in the author groups that if you've had a loss for more than 3 years, you can't take any more expenses and you're now put into the hobby world. And that's not true. So whenever anyone says that, do not listen to them. That is not a thing. The IRS doesn't look and say, oh, you've had a loss for 3 years, can't take your business deductions anymore. There's so many different factors. So that's another good reason to have a separate bank account, because it's just another feather in your cap to say, yes, it's a business.
Right. And there are large corporations that have run losses for many, many, many years.
Tesla. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yep,
like Chrysler ran at a loss for like a decade at one point. I'm pretty sure they continued to claim business expenses.
Yes.
So that totally makes sense. That's good. No, that's good advice. You're right. Because there a lot of times there's a lot of like the financial advice equivalent of old wives' tales that circulate that can get people in trouble or cause them to miss out on stuff. So that's the number one thing. Should you also have separate credit cards?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Get a separate credit card, get a separate PayPal, get a different Square, get a different Venmo. As long as you're keeping it separate, it makes life so much easier. Because I mean, if you think about it, like a lot of authors are, I like to say, I use the phrase number nervous. We don't typically like looking at numbers unless you're a dork. So if you have the 2 separate checking accounts and you only have 12 transactions a month, that's so much easier to like drop into a bucket when you're doing your summary of information versus if you're mixing it in with your actual bank account, which has your Netflix and your kids' T-ball registration and this and this and this and your Amazon purchase. And you're looking at that Amazon purchase on your January bank statement and saying, was that for my copies of my books or like my office chair? Or was that for my kids' new shoes? And so it's just so much easier to split them.
That makes a ton of sense. Yeah. And then, and also I think it probably helps with cash flow too, where you're much more aware if you're needing to borrow from personal finances to pay for business things, because every single time you do it, you're going to have to transfer money over and you'd be like, am I making the right cash flow decisions here? Or I need to wait until Amazon pays me to do this thing, or I have to borrow it for myself and then pay myself back. Which is a little bit cumbersome, but that's actually kind of a good thing in some ways, I feel like, because it stops you from just not being aware of bad habits as quickly.
Oh yeah, I had to put myself on a cover ban when I first got started because I didn't realize that it was just a tornado that sucks you in. And you're like, I want that cover, I want that one, I want that one. And I was buying up all the covers and I'm like, I don't even write fantasy. What am I doing? And then I was like, I have to put money into my checking account. What is this? And I still have.
I'm pretty sure that almost every author has had to at some point put their foot down and say, like, I have to stop buying covers. You know, I have covers I'll never use, I think, at this point, like just so many of them. I also did, once I was doing really well, I did a lot of photo shoots and like custom bespoke photo shoots with costumes and makeup artists and all sorts of things. And I had to eventually like say, Mel, you've got 25,000 pictures now. I think you don't need to do any more bespoke photo shoots.
So fun though.
It really was fun. It was amazing. I loved it. All right. How you mentioned that I should ask you this too, because I think this is probably something that you encounter a lot. How should people keep their records?
So anyway, just keep them. So when you're handing a shoebox full of receipts to your accountant at tax time, they want to either cry, jump out their office window, fire you, or stab you in the eye with their pen. So don't do that. So summarize them yourself.
Together. What if they were like organized chronologically and stapled together? Would you suffer a little bit? No, they would still come after you. Okay.
Staples are actually really bad.
Okay, good. Not that I've ever done this. I'm just like spitballing here.
Yeah, it makes me cry. So basically, either whether you're summarizing it a monthly, weekly, whatever, even at the year end. I mean, I don't recommend it doing it year end because then you're not really being able to do any of those business decisions or tax planning or anything like that. And if you're just going by cash flow on your checking account, then whatever. I mean, I have author clients that really, they don't even look at their profit and loss. They haven't done it for 3 years and they're just like, I have money in my checking account. I'm good. But I am not that type of person. But anyways, like if you just either do it in like a paper journal, you could use a spreadsheet like Excel, or you could use a software like QuickBooks or Xero or FreshBooks. Those are kind of your 3 options on what you can do. We're artists, we're authors. People really like the feel of pen scratching on paper. I find a lot of authors really like paper journals. On the flip side, we're also on a computer usually typing, except for like the old school people, the retro, they like to write in their notebooks. So if you have access to Google Sheets or Excel, I like Excel more. It's so easy just to drop it in and do it that way. And then if there's the people that would rather pay for it to not be a concern, you have something like QuickBooks where if you pay $30 a month, it does your bookkeeping for you, which is just so nice. You set up the bank rules, anything that's charged to Staples on your credit card automatically goes into office expense. Anything that you bought at Home Depot goes into whatever. And it can automate it. And then you're paying $30 a month for the convenience of not having to even think about it anymore. And you're not paying a bookkeeper and you're not wasting your own time, because what do you want to spend your time doing? Writing or?
Yeah. I actually say to people all the time, like there's one thing in your business that only you can do, and that's writing the book. Anything else someone else can do. So if you're spending time doing these other things, you're not spending time doing the one thing that only you can do. Jody says, my account requires me to use a system, giving them a profit and loss statement and rolling it up for them. It keeps me aware of how and where I'm spending my money. And she uses Excel spreadsheets as well.
Nice.
So, yeah, I feel that's like porn to you, right? Like
when people say they actually keep their records.
Oh, that's awesome. That's good to know, though. Like, and you have to think about too. Like at the end of the day, your tax professional is a person and probably doesn't want to be burning the midnight oil, from March onward or whatever to get stuff done. So, I imagine clients that give them organized stuff are probably like favored and maybe get more attention and or preferential treatment.
Oh, absolutely. Because like when I was doing like 80-hour weeks doing taxes, I mean, it starts on like January 15th, goes to April 15th, more during COVID when the tax deadlines were extended. And it's like, if someone gives me a completed profit and loss and I trust their numbers, I'm doing that return first. Like that one is like an easy one I can bang out. Instead, if I'm looking at a return and I'm like, oh my God, I need to add up a stack of receipts and invoices this big and categorize them myself and do all that. I'm just now doing data entry that you're being charged $150 an hour for me to do.
That's pretty crazy, actually, if you think about it.
Yeah. So, I mean, when you think of it that way and you're paying an accountant $300 to do your bookkeeping, you're like, I could have just paid for a software to do that throughout the year. And it would have cost me the same and been less time at tax season. So it's worth it.
And your accountant would hate you less.
Absolutely.
All right. Let's see. So if an author is looking to hire a bookkeeper to handle all that categorization and data entry and whatnot, or an accountant that will do that and file their taxes as well, what should they be asking these people as when they're evaluating them?
When I see this in the author groups, sometimes you see people say you need to find someone that specializes in authors, and that's not really a thing. So
Yeah, I don't think so too.
at least not where I've been around. So it's very much you want someone that knows small businesses.
Mhm.
If you're selling direct, you really want someone that knows sales tax and multi-state taxation, because that's a tangled web. That or
Yeah,
you outsource that and have the professionals talk together. You want someone that they're not going to necessarily know how to help you run your actual author business. They're not going to be able to tell you the best way to structure your royalties or whether you should go to wide or whether you should stay under Kindle Unlimited. They're not going to know that stuff. Just like when I
mhm,
have real estate clients that come to me and I do their taxes for all their rental properties, I'm not telling them what process they have to go through to evict a tenant.
right,
Um,
yeah,
so I think that's important for authors to remember is that we as authors are not some special unicorn brand that you're not going to find an author accountant. You're not going to find someone that specializes just in authors, um,
right,
which I think a lot of people forget. And so I see at least a lot where people are like, you need someone that knows about author deductions. And it's like, they're the same deductions that any other business owner gets to have. So it's
right,
when it's important is just to make sure that they're familiar with self-employed individuals.
right.
Um, you need to know how they communicate, whether they want in-person, phone, or email. You want to know whether they have such a large client list that if you join them, whether or not you are going to have to be automatically extended because the CPA
Okay,
profession is dying. And that means that we have more clients than we know what to do with, which means prices are going up because we want good clients. But it also means that if we take on new clients, especially if you contact someone during tax season, you might not even get a call back. So contact them before tax season starts.
right.
But if you do, they might say, we'll take you on, but you're automatically going to get extended and you'll be filed in June, July, August.
Right.
And sometimes you just have to be okay with that because that's your only option. Um,
Well, yeah, I'm guessing if you didn't plan for it, your other options do it yourself and hope for the best. So,
yeah. Yeah. There's what's the phrase? The lack of planning on your part is not an emergency on ours. I
yep.
think the accounting profession is adopting that very strongly right now.
Yeah, I feel like the accounting profession, I've always looked at that and thought, like, this seems like a very unhealthy way to live. Doing this crazy 3 month burn and then somehow having to like function like a normal human being again afterward and find new equilibrium and everything.
Yeah, it's not
Oh,
great. It's not fun.
I can imagine.
Um,
Um,
so that's
okay.
something we can look forward
I'm
to.
guessing that my advice on what people should do as far as collecting sales tax for direct sales always makes you cringe whenever I say it.
It does. But you're not the only one. I've talked to other like big name authors who say the same exact thing. So like
Yeah.
I think I talked with maybe it was Inez Johnson, possibly. And she was saying that like, oh, I don't sell to foreign countries. Like I don't want to deal with that. Like she doesn't sell direct to the foreign
Mhm.
countries. And it was like, okay, that makes sense. And then like people that do courses through like Teachable, for instance, they Teachable can take care of your VAT. So you don't even have to look at it. But
Right.
VAT, value added tax
Yeah.
for foreign countries. And so when you're selling direct, it's important to remember that sales tax is determined based on where the customer lives.
Yeah.
And so a lot of authors just set up their store and then just ship willy-nilly and don't think about the fact that they might be incurring some nexus in like those
Yeah.
states.
But a lot
Um,
of to my knowledge, a lot of states don't care about, they don't want your tax money unless you spend do a certain volume too, right?
yeah, so the
Yeah.
threshold. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because otherwise it's actually more work for them to take your $5 than it would have been to just forget about it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Different though when you're in person. So like
Right.
for when
Yes.
people go to Vegas for the 20 books presentation or Denver or any of those things, the physical presence triggers different nexus. So that's
Right.
just something for anyone watching this. If you're doing direct
What
sales and you're going to places,
what
be
is
aware.
Nexus, by the way?
Oh, nexus is um how can I describe it? It's like you stepping into a state and planting a flag in the ground and saying, "Hey, I'm doing business here, and I might actually have to owe you taxes." And so there's
Okay.
sales tax nexus and there's income tax nexus.
Is that like a federal program or standard or something like that? Or is it just like an
Um,
industry term?
it's a oh no, it's a formal term. So each state has a different threshold for what constitutes as nexus.
Okay.
So some states, it's very, very confusing. So sales tax nexus, you have to meet certain criteria. And then
Right.
that means that you now have sales tax in that state. Income tax nexus is one of many criteria, and each state has a different threshold for what they consider nexus, which is just that responsibility to
Right. So
retain.
that's what you want to look up. You want to say like, okay, I'm shipping books to California. I need to look up California's Nexus laws and
Yes.
whatnot. I know there is software for Shopify called TaxJar that I think
Yes.
does some of that for you.
Yep. Yeah,
There-
software is amazing.
yeah.
There's TaxJar, Tax Valet, Quaderno, Avalara, maybe Lemon Squeezy, I think's been doing it. There are a lot of good ones that are like worth the price of not having to deal with
And
it.
do they all remit the tax to the state for you as well?
I think some of them do.
Okay. I know TaxJar does. I wasn't sure about all of them though.
Yep.
Obviously, that's something you'd want to look into is whether or not it actually sends the money or not.
Yeah.
That's actually one of the reasons why, for the longest time, I used Etsy
Mm.
for any sort of physical book sales like that, because I'm just like, Etsy's going to collect the tax and send it where it needs to go, and I don't need to worry about it. But at a certain point, you're like, I'd rather have my own store for control and whatnot. But
Yeah.
my policy also is too, like, I'm sure you've heard me say this before. Is like, I'm like, well, I'm not really within the United States. It's different because this no matter where you live, states can impose things on you whether or not you live there. But outside the United States, I'm like, I don't know. Like, am I really obligated to be the EU's tax collector? I don't feel like I am.
Am I really going to go to India and I need to be concerned that they're going to detain me for not remitting my VAT tax?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I don't know. Like I can't imagine that many authors are worried too much about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
I wish they made it simpler.
Yeah, it would be kind of nice if they paid me to do it. If they're like, we're going to give you like a stipend for collecting taxes for us, we're like, cool. Now because I feel like I'm doing free labor for these foreign governments in a way, and it kind of feels like bullshit.
You're now an agent for all a million countries out there.
Yeah, like I looked it up, and like every country actually wants you to do this. Like at the like I was like, Canada, yeah, Canada wants you to collect GST if you sell things to Canadians, and all that. I'm like, was looking at more and more. I'm like, wow, every freaking country on the planet actually wants me to register and send them money if their citizens buy from me.
Oh yeah, and like it's like sometimes even the like the not I'm going to say counties. Counties isn't the right word, but like your different jurisdictions within a country. It's nuts. Like you look at like
Yeah,
some areas of Germany or other like subsections of different countries, and they have their own rate that you have to be aware of, and it's just like,
yeah,
come on, guys.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of ridiculous. So yeah, so I'm kind of like I outside the United States and Canada, because I'm Canadian citizen, so I have to care what Canada thinks.
Yeah.
I have a sort of a come at me bro sort of mentality. but also I also feel like the amount of money I spend selling to these other random foreign countries is so small that if I were ever to be like in Brandon Sanderson's shoes or something like that, I would obviously not have such a blasé approach to the whole situation.
What a glorious problem to have.
Yeah, right. Yeah, like exactly. When you have that problem, at a certain point when you have those kinds of problems, you'll be okay.
Yeah.
For dealing with them. All right. What are the most likely categories authors usually have for business expenses, and what expenses do they usually forget?
So for anyone who wants like a list of categories to kind of base their bookkeeping on, you can look up the Schedule C on the Form 1040 on the IRS's website, and that actually has a list of like pre-prepared expense buckets. And so
Oh,
for
cool.
authors, the most that I see used is the advertising bucket, the contract labor bucket, the office expense bucket, which is like the catch-all bucket. The office
Right.
expense bucket will hold everything from office supplies, pens, paper, all of the notebooks that we love to buy,
Computer?
Post-its. Sorry, what?
Is your computer office supplies as well?
If it's under $2,500, it's a de minimis item to the IRS, and you can expense it immediately.
Oh, cool. And if
Yep.
it's more than the capital expense, and you have to do the whole depreciation and all that
Yep.
jazz.
Yep.
Okay.
Exactly.
Shoot. I have a $5,000 computer.
Yeah, it's really nice in terms of simplicity for small
Yeah.
business owners to just be like,
Actually,
"Hey,
but I built my computer myself, and no individual component was over $2,500. I bet you they all could be expensed individually then.
s- eh." Um, the right answer is probably not.
Really? If you bought a bunch of components and made a thing out of it, like if I made a desk for my office and I bought the wood separately and then assembled it, they
Yeah,
might not
so
view it as those individual purchases. They might view it as a total value of the desk.
I'm using the same rationale that they use for when you install like giant machinery in like a plant facility. They actually take the cost of the big machinery, like the big. My husband works at a manufacturing plant, so if he has like a big tumbler or a grinder or things like that, they have that hundreds of thousands of dollars machine, but they also have to capitalize the cost of the labor to move it in. They have to capitalize the cost of the shipping to bring the project,
Oh, really? Okay.
any electrical that has to be run to charge that to run that machine has to be capitalized too. So I'm thinking that probably for a nice computer, you'd probably have to add it all up. But
So
does anyone
so what you're telling me though is that someone at the IRS thought of this.
yeah.
That's
But
good.
the news is you can depreciate it all in 1 year anyways. So
Oh, okay. That's not so bad
bonus
then.
that puppy right out. It's called bonus depreciation. You can wipe it all out.
See, this is the things that you would never know unless you talk to a professional too. Like like that sort of stuff. That's really cool. Um, so what do they forget? What do authors forget to expense the most?
I would say maybe either vendor fees or like any kind of like professional education fees, like conference fees and dues or courses and things. Those are kind of like the big ticket items. And I think sometimes in their minds, they're not thinking like, oh, this course isn't directly generating income. Like
Right.
if I'm buying this SPF foundation course or if I'm doing a money mindset course or things like that.
Or you're buying Ashley's novel numbers courses.
There you go. Yeah. It's not actually generating any income. So is it really still an expense? And it is. It's a legitimate business thing.
Okay.
Um,
That makes a lot of sense.
Shipping too. I mean, a lot of whenever you're shipping anything for your business, I mean, you get
Right.
that, and that just goes right up into office expense with everything else. If you have any software fees like Sudowrite, ChatGPT, Canva, like all of those. That's why it's so great to have the separate checking account because you see
Right.
everything that hits Google Storage or OneDrive.
Yeah.
Like you might use your word processor for other things besides your business, but if you're using it predominantly for writing your manuscript, there you go.
Mhm. And even I would imagine even, if you have a computer that's used primarily for work, any software that you install on that computer for that computer to function, would be like if you bought a new version of Windows or something like that, that would
Oh,
actually
yeah.
be a business expense.
Yep, absolutely. If you bought like a subscription to Tiny Beans, which is just the photo app for your kids that shows what ages there is, and you installed it on your computer, probably not that. But for
Right. Yeah.
everything else, for updates or virus software and things like that, absolutely.
Yeah. Cool. That's really neat. That's something that I don't know if I'd even thought of. That like random programs. I mean, I guess I think of it for a large extent, like a lot of the things like my Canva subscription, all that sort of stuff. That's all business expense. But I'm thinking like I have a computer that used exclusively for work.
Oh, yeah.
So everything that I use for work on it would be, you know,
I
yeah,
think you have that
exactly.
cool keyboard, right? You have the
I,
keyboard that's like the
I
two
do have
lines?
the cool split keyboard. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
That.
that's a good one. Any like you have a mouse rest or a hand
Mhm.
rest for your wrists, any kind of mouse pad.
Okay.
If you have a chair that has a special back or a cushion, all of it.
Yeah, cool. That's good. Yeah, you're right. A lot of times we don't think about a lot of those little things that would be in there. I've Jill has her work cut for her because I think we run 5 businesses now. Um, because our daughter runs a crafting business where we go to craft shows and sell stuff. So we have like yarn flows into our house like it's a river. And so that's a business. And then I have like a computer building business where I do that for other people. I have writing. We have all the consulting that we do, and then I also do like I have like a whole gardening, post-apocalyptic gardening thing that I do. And so like half the clothing I buy is our costumes effectively for that business. So and then like everything behind me, that's all set pieces. So it's like the whole thing just becomes a business expense,
Oh, have
which is
you been
pretty
watching
wild.
Fallout? Have you watched the Fallout on
I
Amazon
have
Prime
watched
yet?
Fallout. Yeah, yeah, I love Fallout. Yeah, I actually have a follow cat suit that so I did follow cosplay and everything.
That's awesome.
Shortly before it came out. Yeah. So yeah, it was such a good show too. They did an amazing job with it. It's it's possibly, I think, the best video game adaptation they've ever done. I've ever seen done.
It's
Um,
really good.
and it's canon. They said it's canon in the same canon as the games,
Oh,
which is pretty wild actually that they've got that too. So
that's awesome.
yeah, yeah. Nerd moment here. All right. So what kind of mistakes do authors make the most often?
Not separating the cash. Have I repeated it enough times for everyone to all go and rush to the bank and separate everything? We're cash basis,
Mhm.
so I would say that that's probably a big one. So basically, you look at your KDP royalties and you run the summary report for the year, and it tells you that you made X, and then you get your 1099 and it says that you made Y, and people freak out and they're like, "Oh my God, Amazon sent me the wrong amount." That's because we're cash basis, which means that we actually pay taxes on the amount that we were paid throughout the year. So we're actually paid in the year last year's November, last year's
Right.
December, up until this year's end of like October. And then we're not paid for the November and December until the following year. So I think that is probably the biggest thing that people kind of forget about is that those royalties are shifted.
Right.
Um, and that the expenses that you pay, I mean, if you're sitting on like a too big of a profit in December, you can just start buying things. And even though you're
Mhm.
not necessarily using them until next year, if you're pre-ordering all of those covers and paying
Mhm.
for them right ahead, you can actually take those deductions in the year that you've paid for them versus when the year you're going to actually get those covers in.
Oh, that's cool. That's a good idea. Yeah, or buy some courses or something like that, even if you're going to take them a bit later next year.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, or that new computer.
Or that new computer.
um, this is a crazy thought, but it was just when you were talking about the types of supply things that we can expense. Is there like the fact that Amazon is actually taking 30% of our sales value? Is there anything that we can get out of that, or to sort of just the
So
system's like, yeah, suck it up?
it's already netted. So what you could do if you really wanted to, I've never seen anyone do it this way, but you could say that like these were my gross sales. And
Hmm.
then these are the fees that Amazon took out of it, and then put those under like the commissions line on your tax return. And then those two netted together would be the amounts that you're paid, basically.
Oh,
And so it gets you to the same spot. But because we're cash basis, it's already factored in the fact that those are removed from you. So it's actually
oh,
probably better because, like in New Hampshire, for instance, businesses are taxed on your gross receipts. So if you
hmm,
gross everything up, you'd now have a higher number and would
right.
subject you to those state income taxes faster.
Okay. It might depend on where you live, but chances are it's effectively kind of already covered. You can't say
Yep.
like, oh, Amazon, I wanted to deduct all this money that Amazon took away from me. You can't
Yes,
do
yeah,
that.
we're
Or
it's kind of already
five
taken
oh,
care of.
damn it. It's like they thought of everything already, eh? Um, all right. And do you have we talked a bit about are there any things that you've seen authors do that are detrimental to their business when it comes to handling their finances?
Yeah. So when I didn't even mention it, but like the big thing that everyone loves to talk about is once you hit X amount of thousands of dollars, you need to be an S corp. You need to be an S corp, and that
Yeah.
is like I can't even stress how wrong that information is. Same with LLC. Oh, once I hit 10 grand, I became an LLC. Like all of that is just crazy to me that people
Okay.
are applying it so unanimously. So to put it in perspective, in New Hampshire, if you're an LLC, you pay $102 for a registration to the Secretary of State every single year, but there's no minimum tax. That's the only thing you pay to be an LLC in New Hampshire.
Okay.
Being an LLC in California, you have your registration fees to the state to be an LLC, but you also have an $800 minimum tax every single year just to have an LLC.
Hmm.
So for someone who doesn't have that in profit, they're already just pummeling themselves. And so in that situation, it is so much better for them to just be a sole proprietorship until they have that kind of money that they can throw $800 away.
Right.
So that's why it drives me nuts when people are like, "Oh, you need to be an LLC," and it's like it is so state specific. I wish I could give an answer to someone and be like, "Oh yes, no, you should be an LLC in Texas, you should be an LLC in New Hampshire. You shouldn't be an LLC in New York. You shouldn't be an LLC in California. But like, you can't do that because it very much is how much money do you have that's excess that you can afford to put towards those fees, and what's your risk acceptability kind of thing. And like the same thing goes for S corps, because like in a lot of people like to play the game with S corps where it's like, I'll take a huge W-2 and then the rest of the money I'll just take as a distribution. Well, if you live in New Hampshire, for instance, they actually tax the distributions as well. And so those get taxed on your interest and dividends tax return, which may or may not be sunsetting in a few years. But in some states, it can be disadvantageous to be an S corp. And so when I talk with authors, they say, well, what about in this state? And it's like, okay, well, you're looking at it here and you're paying less in income taxes, sure, because it's being shifted from your entity onto your tax return, but you're paying payroll taxes now on your wages from the S corp side of things. You're also paying your own employee payroll taxes on your W-2. And then you're also paying any state income taxes and payroll taxes to your state on top of federal payroll taxes. So it can
and you have to file quarterly and all the other nonsense too.
Yes, yeah, and it can add up. And then you have additional, like to be an S corp. At my firm, we dealt with small business owners and more wealthy individuals. Like we wouldn't even touch a return for less than like $1,000. So when we were looking at S corp returns, the minimum S corp return that we would do was roughly $1,500 to $2,000, like for just tax prep, and that's just basic beginning. And if it needed a bunch of journal entries, it was more than that. So when you're looking at whether you want to be an S corp, you have to factor in the fact that you're going to have additional tax prep costs. You're going to have additional legal compliance costs. You're going to have additional a payroll service to handle the payroll. So it is, it's not just once you hit green means go, become one of those things. It's really, if you don't have this is going to sound really harsh. If you don't have the money to pay for a CPA to run the numbers for you, then you're probably not at the point where you need to worry about it.
That's fair, yeah. And I know that like with Jill and I we run an S corp, and we ran an LLC before that, and we spent a bunch of time looking at, because you have the sole proprietor. I forget what the tax is called when you're a sole proprietor. You have to pay like this self-employment tax.
Yep.
Is that just called self-employment tax? I think.
Yep. That's it.
Yeah.
Yep.
So we were looking at that thinking, wow, that's a really big number. But then we were looking at like all that stuff you were talking about for being an S corp. And we're like, this is also a really big number. And I think then for us, the threshold was around $150,000 to $200,000 a year when it started, when it looked like we would save money by switching to an S corp. But it wasn't before that at all. And we get to, in Massachusetts, we can take advantage of some pretty decent dividends stuff as well. We still have to be smart about it. You can't pay yourself like 10% on your W-2 and like 90% through dividends. They're going to look askance at that sort of behavior.
Oh, and it totally screws you for later on with Social Security as well.
Yeah. Or trying to get a mortgage or anything like that.
Yep.
You know, because they're just like, wow, you make no money. So
yep.
we're like, oh crap, we want to take out a loan. We have to pay ourselves more now, kind of thing. So yeah, there's a lot of angles in there. And I still don't know, like we're kind of like looking back, we're like, it was most of the time it's probably a wash, actually, just with a lot more work, but financially kind of a wash as far as like how well we're doing being. And I mean, Jill could say better, and I shouldn't. She might actually have a difference of opinion, but
she's yelling at you in the comments right now.
But you're right. Like I know we use someone for handling payroll. We use a service that handles doing the quarterly filings that we have to do, and we have to submit, what's it called, the annual meeting notes for the business and all that sort of thing. And then I think Massachusetts charges us $500 a year just to exist as an S corp or something like that. So
they will do the same for LLCs at least, but it's not for sole proprietors. But yeah,
gotcha. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, they're going to get you. They like to get you a lot of different ways. But no, you're right. Like it really. I feel like that is really good advice. Like if you can't afford to talk to a professional and pay them $150 or whatever it costs for their time to even just give you an answer to that question, then you're probably not the place where you should be doing that.
Yeah, it should be a clear difference. It's not like I did like a whole spreadsheet the other day, and I try to include like everything that I could think of for additional costs. So that way, when people ask me, I could be like, well, let's run a scenario. And it took me forever. I'm really good at Excel spreadsheets. Like I even made one for like bookkeeping for authors, and like it's great, but like this took me even longer than that. And I so many circular references and statements, and I got to it and it was like, oh, you saved $500 being an S corp, or and then you have to increase like a more and more and more, and like you guys had, you really have to have that big chunk before it's like, oh, okay, all right, that's when it's worthwhile. Because I mean, revenue fluctuates so much on royalties. I
Yeah.
mean, it can't be a close call to make that decision, because then you're going to end up kind of shooting yourself in the foot. And so
Or
that's a
you
really
get sick and you write 2 fewer books that year or something like that, and then you're boned. So
yeah.
yeah, yeah, that totally makes a lot of sense. I think we covered all the questions I have. Was there anything else that you wanted to talk about? Anything we didn't cover?
Oh God, what are like some like rumor things that happens like for authors? No.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we ranted a lot. Do people
We
have
did, yeah.
questions?
We got some people commenting on the things that we said, but no one actually had any specific questions. Oh wait, no, we do have a couple. Jill corrected me. It's $800 that we pay to the state of Massachusetts for just existing. But she does tell me that we are squarely. Once ran our tax return as if we weren't an S corp, we would have paid a ton of money being self-employed. So apparently we're squarely in the we should be an S corp category right now, which is always good to know that the effort is worth it. Let's see. Monica says, at what point should authors start paying federal and state quarterlies?
Oh, that's a good question. So when you think about it, like to give background, so when you think about it and you're a W-2 employee and you're working for an employer, they're taking money out of your paycheck every month and they're remitting it to the state and the government for your payroll taxes. When you become self-employed, you don't have that person anymore. And the IRS doesn't like just being paid on April 15th. They want their money throughout the year, right?
Yeah, the government to run, it's expensive.
They want that money. And so they ask people to send in quarterly estimates. And so you can figure out what your projected net tax is going to be at the end of the year, divide it into 4s, and then that's what that quarter's payment should be. The next quarter, you figure out what that projected net income from the year is going to be, minus what you've already paid, divide the rest by 3. That's what your quarterly should be. So you can make it a flowing number that changes.
Every quarter you can readjust based on what you think the year is going to have.
Exactly. Okay. Or you can just do a straight number every quarter if that's easier for you. You also don't have to. So okay. That's just like a note. So I mentioned that we had like more expensive client or more wealthy clients. They very much did not want to give the IRS an interest-free loan. That is how they.
I totally get that. I feel the same way.
And they were like, hey, I'm making more money having this in the stock market. I'm using this for my businesses. I'm not sending the IRS estimates. They can charge me whatever they're going to charge in interest and penalties. I made more in my investment account. And that's completely legitimate too. Like that is all your decision kind of thing.
So basically once you're self-employed, they want you to be sending the quarterly as soon as you're self-employed. There's no money, there's no financial threshold.
Start looking at it once you have more than like $1,000 of self-employment tax.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Is that quarterly self-employment tax, yearly self-employment tax?
Yearly. Yeah. Yearly.
Okay.
Yep. So when you're looking at your tax return, if your self-employment tax line is $1,000, then you can start looking at when you can send in quarterlies at any time if you want. Right. If you're going to send it in by mail, please send it mail certified receipt, like mail receipt, please. I have had so many clients where the IRS has misapplied the quarterly payments and sent them to the wrong social security number. You have no idea. Like thousands of dollars of estimates have been putting on someone else's account. What would have happened if that person had requested a refund and gotten all that money? I don't know. But I recommend paying through the IRS Direct Pay platform, and like with a credit card, you can get points. But if you are going to send through mail, certified mail receipt, please. And then keep a copy of the front and the back of the check, because you'll need that when you argue with them.
That totally makes sense. And you said like at a certain point, they'll charge you penalties if you don't file quarterly income tax. Is there a threshold for when that starts to happen?
So they look at what your last year's tax was, and then they look at what your current year's tax was, and they say, okay, did they know that they were going to owe us money and they didn't? Then okay. And it's like 0.25%. It's a
Oh, okay.
it's a small percent of
A lot of
interest
savings
in
accounts will
private
actually give you more interest than that kind of thing.
it's pretty small. Yeah. I mean, if you owe them 20 grand, obviously those percents are a portion of the whole, but it's probably not going to be enough that if you owe them that much money, the penalties aren't going to break you, more or
Okay,
less.
good to know. Well, I think we've covered everything everyone asked. It was fabulous to have you on. We really appreciate it. And you have some coupons that you put together for different offerings, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I don't I wish I had them in front of me right now. But basically, so I have um the handbook, which just kind of goes over all like the federal tax stuff, US based. Sorry,
Hmm.
European and other countries. And then I also have a bookkeeping organizer, which is for the people
Okay.
that do like the paper journals. And it's just a bunch of like tables where you enter in your numbers. And then I actually walk you through at the end what your numbers are going to be for your tax return. And I have like little color coded things. I can't keep messing this up on the side so you can see what month you're in. But like really, I have courses that have the discount codes that Mal and Jill have, and then I have my pride and joy, which is the Excel spreadsheet, which just automates
Okay.
your tax return for you, and it's kind of dummy proofed. I put so many locks and drop downs and lists in there, then you can use it. You buy it once and then you use it forever, kind of thing,
Cool.
and it just automatically populates everything, which is so beautiful. But that's my thing. And then
Okay.
if you need help setting up anything with like QuickBooks, I can do that too.
Awesome. And so you have your stuff is at novelnumbers.teachable.com.
Yep.
And then there's a number of coupons. I'm going to put them all in a comment, and I'm going to add them to this video itself. But there's Writing Wise 30 and Writing Wise 15, and they apply to different courses that you have as well for 30 and 15% discount.
Yep.
Cool. All right. And I love that the spreadsheet is like your pride and joy. That's like the thing you love the most.
It's beautiful.
I do love a really well put together spreadsheet myself. So
I use QuickBooks Online for all my stuff because I just set up the bank rules and it's like a crock pot. I set it and forget
mhm.
it and it just does its own thing. And I tweak it a little bit more so I can see like profitability per series. I have Solaris, but like I use that for like my own thing. And if I didn't have QuickBooks Online, just by the nature of my job, I would be using my Excel spreadsheet. It is gorgeous. It's a masterpiece.
Awesome. That's great to hear. And is the Excel spreadsheet also on Teachable? Is that where people can get that
Yeah,
too?
yeah, yeah. I have a video walkthrough of everything. It's like a digital download. You get the Excel. It doesn't work in Sheets, I don't think. So, or
That
whatever
makes
the
sense.
Mac
Yeah.
version is.
Yeah.
Um, but it's really nice.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you for joining us and for sharing all this information with us. And I think it's really cool that you're doing this and you have all this knowledge, and that you can help people outside your state. It sounds like even as well, because I know a lot of
Yes,
people
yes.
don't have enough experience to know how to do that. So I think that's fabulous as well. So if folks have any questions, they can always reach out to Ashley in our Facebook group. I'm sure you wouldn't mind if people message you in there or made a post and ping you in there. And then of course you can go to novelnumbers.teachable.com. And again, I'll put those links in chat and in the post, and you guys can check all that out. All right. So
Thank you
thanks
so
for
much
coming
for
on.
having me. This was awesome. Thank you so
Yeah, it
much.
was a lot of fun.
You and Jill
Thank
are
you.
like my heroes. So thank you for having me. It was so fun to like geek out about this with you.
Yeah, yeah, it's totally fun. And a couple people actually have said thank you. A bunch of people said thank you in the chat that you can't see, but they did as well. So
Thank you
it
guys.
was great having you. And I guess there won't be a lunch with Mel next week because I'll be in Oklahoma, but we'll be back the week after. So I'll see everybody then. Bye, everyone.